Key. What's that all about? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Are you recording, by the way?
Thank you. Yeah. Perfect. And here we are for another episode of Dualistic Unity Raw call-in edition. I am always excited by these call-in shows because we never know who's going to call in or what point they're going to make. Sometimes people come in with an argument or with a point to prove, and sometimes they come in just to share their journey, or in some cases they want to ask us a question or share an insight, and we always appreciate that. So do yourself a favor. If you would like to chat on this call-in episode, don't waste any time. Go to dualisticunity.com/live and just fill in your information, agree to the terms. Basically, you're just agreeing that this will be on the podcast episode after we do this recording. And that's pretty much it. That's all it takes to join us. So please, there's no better way to get in there than to just get in there.
Got my other phone was in my bag, and I also don't have the Wi-Fi password, so we're just going to be live on Instagram right now, but that's okay. But yeah, this is going to be fun. I think the last couple we've had, I don't know, like 8 or 9 people join, hop in and chat, and it's a great time. It's fun to be able to have so many different conversations just within a 2-hour podcast episode or hour 45 minute. And and it's always usually towards the end there's a build up. So if you're listening, if you're watching, if you're on Instagram over here, hop on what is it, dualisticunity.com/live to get the link and sign up, and you can be on an episode. So to Kathleen, who just requested to be in my live video, you can just join us on here right on the screen with us for this episode. So yeah, hop in and join us and chat. You can bring up whatever you want, chat about whatever you want. If you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have insights, things to share, hop in and we're here to chat about it. So,
it really is that simple. And I think this is funny because as we've been discussing in the last 2 episodes of Dualistic Unity Social, and I think we discussed it in Raw the other day, we are currently looking for a advertising sales agent to help us with all of the advertising space that is potentially available on our current podcast of 230 plus episodes. So in that search, I was discussing the podcast with one of the candidates, and we were talking about the community. We're talking about how everybody really is making whatever this is. It's the result of all of us just either putting in the attention into our lives, or putting in the attention to talking to other people on Discord, or even being in our groups or any of that. In basically, you all inspire us and you inform a lot of the insights that we go through. And so kind of sheepishly, we were talking about guests coming on the show, and he was asking like, oh, that'd be great if I could come on the show. I'm like, yeah, absolutely you'll have to come on the show if you're working with us. And his response was, really, like that easy? It's like, that's what this is all about. It really is. That's what this is all about. We're all in this together. I mean, if you're a part of this, if you're you and you're going through the shit, you're a part of this, in which case we want to talk to you. We want to hear about how it's going. We want to know. And so that's what it's like to be involved with us as somebody who works with us as well. Like, we want to be involved to the best of our ability. That said, we have somebody in the queue, and it's Amanda. So we're just going to let her in.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of that, is like, you don't even have to request to be a guest. You can just join us on a roundtable, join us on a call-in show. Every Tuesday, there's an opportunity to be on an episode and share shit. So take advantage of that shit, people. God damn. Hey, Amanda, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I've been having some user error, with audio recently. And so I just had to make sure that, we can get it together a little bit. But I am so glad to be here with you guys. Great live show, as always, and today has been quite interesting. So, we've been talking, or you guys have been talking about like growing DU and how when people are in sales, it's a lot smoother when they can, when they're invested in the product. And so it's easier to sell the product because they're not just thinking about the profits, right? And so I was in McDonald's earlier today. So I'm traveling, everybody. We are in the airport right? We are here for the motherfucking adventure. And well, before we get to the airport, you know, we got to stop and get some food. So we stopped at McDonald's, and we had a work meeting, and we got through it. And there was a meeting with the district managers and general managers of McDonald's in the middle of this. And they're talking about how this McDonald's is underperforming, and they're all tense. And one of the managers is like, you know, this is unacceptable. Like, this is embarrassing that we're not able to sell. And in the same space, there happens to be like a homeless guy who is eating his food, who paid for his food and is sitting at a booth, but he ends up having, so I don't know how it happened, but he had like 2 large fries, and he walks up to the managers and he's like, you know, excuse me, you know, I don't need this food, and you know, is there any way that I could maybe like offer it to someone else? You know, does anybody want it? And so like, I didn't expect him to like offer his food to anybody, but the managers were so tense about underperforming that they're like, that's so rude. Like, we're having this meeting, like you know, you can't be coming up to us. And I'm like, so you guys are talking about how you guys aren't doing well, and the first thing you're going to do is shit on a customer? Like, the fact that you can't see that not having a relationship with customers, not seeing beyond the profit is hurting you. There's no, so you should end the meeting right then and there. I almost wanted to walk into them and be like, you guys should just end the meeting, because if this is how you're going to treat your customers, you're never going to perform better. So like, you should just stop trying. You should just all quit and go do something else. You know, because it's not about just profit. It's not just about everything as a means to an end, because at that point you lose the passion, you lose the connection, you lose what would drive success, what would drive growth, because you can't see beyond that end goal, and everything is just a means to that end. And it was just so disappointing that, you know, that they ended up threatening this homeless person, like, well, you need to go because, you know, you can't do this, and don't come back, and you know, like, making a horrible impression to me about their commitment to their customer that they're so desperate for. And I just thought that was so disappointing, that that was how they decided to see, that they didn't see him and they just saw a problem because they were caught up in their own idea of what they thought they should be doing as a team, as individuals. And it was just so disappointing. And you know, and me and that guy, we had chatted for a little bit, and he had tried to, like, you know, keep the conversation going, because I saw a person and I didn't see somebody that was homeless. I didn't see somebody that wasn't worth my attention. I was like, you know, we're in this room together, and you decided to say hi, and what's the harm in saying hello? What's the harm in just being a person with another person, you know?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Unfortunately, it gets lost in you know, business as usual, and corners get cut and costs get saved, and eventually it becomes more about the marketing and opening up more businesses than it is about the people that you're supposed to be serving. I mean, to the point now where McDonald's French fries, for example, are made up of 17 different ingredients. You know, and it really is just about them saving money and creating something that's more addictive at the same time, and it's to drive business. It has nothing to do with our nutrition. It has nothing to do with, you know, the well-being of their customers. It has to do with the bottom line.
Yeah, it just goes to show the importance of being relaxed and maintaining that, because even if you play out the people in the meeting, it's like they're tense as fuck about this thing. And it's like, to do what? To make more money? To do what? To buy more stuff? To do what? To be more free, which is just like convoluted in itself and doesn't really check out. But, you know, that's what we strive for. And then it's to do what? To eventually be able to be relaxed. Like, that's what they're trying to get to. And they're not able to recognize that it's available right there. And if they were to do it, they may see an opportunity to see things differently. It's like we strong arm everything. We get so tense and so rigid, thinking that if I do that, like, this thing isn't going right, and me being tense and angry is like a show of my passion and how much I care about this, and we're going to figure it out. Meanwhile, like, the shittiness of the business is stemming from probably shitty treatment of customers, which is what they end up doing because of it. And like, their head so far up their ass, they can't realize that they're doing the exact thing that's causing the shit to happen. And that way, all because they're probably hung up on right and wrong. Like, you're doing things the wrong way. We got to figure out what the right way to do them is, as if that's just a thing that they're going to magically, you know, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the answer. It's like, or you could relax and be a component of that answer playing out. Like that's what allows it to come up. Like how many more insights can you have when you're chilling, when you're relaxed, when you're not trying to get somewhere, when you're just being it? And it's the same for business too. Like it's vital to business to be relaxed and allow those insights to arise. Because as much as we talk about insights in regards to our lives and society, it's like if you're in a business, you own a company, like maintaining that state of relaxation will allow you to see things a little bit differently. And letting go of the idea of what you think is best can allow you to see things differently enough to maybe see another route or another way of doing things that you wouldn't have seen if you were so caught in thinking that you're doing the right thing or not doing the right thing. And you're going to find out the right thing to do by getting really fucking angry in this meeting. Like it's madness, but it's like self-validation, it's self-soothing in a sense, as opposed to trying to actually get anywhere.
And you're threatening customers, like a paid customer, somebody who had already paid food, had already spent time eating in your establishment, and now you're threatening them and telling them never come back here. I was like, you're doing the exact opposite of what you're saying you so desperately need to accomplish in this meeting with all of your other managers, with all of your other employees. They also said, like, we can't approve overtime because we're underperforming so much that we can't even offer overtime to the employees to be more available to customers, because you'd rather be short staffed than lose money by paying your employees for being there longer than the normal 40 hours a week. I was like, you got to be fucking shitting me, guys. Like, how short-sighted are you? And what's so funny is that people fail to realize is that business is all about relationships. If you can't have relationships with your customers, your business will never thrive. If you can't have relationships with other businesses, with other community leaders, with your employees, your business won't survive. It's all about maintaining relationships and deepening those relationships. And you can't do that if you can't see past your own needs or your own goals or what you think the company needs to do as a separate entity from its relationships. But that is just so short-sighted, and it just, I've seen people who are fucking brilliant, book smart as hell, right? And they can't keep a job because they don't know how to work with people. So it really doesn't matter if you have all the on paper skills. If you can't maintain relationships with your coworkers, with your clients, you won't go far. And I don't care if you're a genius. If you were Einstein and Einstein couldn't have a conversation with the guy next to him, nobody would know about the theory of relativity. And I know that that is a crazy hypothetical, but that is my perspective on it, that he could speak to people. He could, and I remember there's a quote between Charlie Chaplin and Einstein. And Einstein said that he was jealous of Chaplin. And he said that he was jealous because, like, people can understand you without you having to speak. And I speak with about a topic that is so complicated that people can't understand it. So I am so brilliant, and I use these super fancy intelligent words, and people can't understand what I'm saying. And you speak no words, people understand you, people can connect with you. And Einstein was jealous of Chaplin. And I just think that people don't think that, everybody, if you put those two people in front of most audiences, they would say, I'd rather be Einstein. And I'd rather be Chaplin. I'd rather not be able to say a word and you understand me than be able to understand this thing that no one else can understand but me. And then I'm on this intellectual island. Lucky me.
That was well said. Absolutely. We have this kind of collective every man for himself mentality. And as a result of that, we have this weird separation between like business and charity, when really business should be, in the general aim of increasing, everybody's well-being in terms of their quality of life. But instead it's just like whoever's at the top of the business, they're going to do the best. It's like, right, but everybody else suffers, and there's this inevitability to this crumbling system when you take that far enough that nobody benefits in the long term. And it's just like we just lack that view. We just don't look at it to the end of its result. We just don't keep watching and go, where is this going to go eventually when people are making it all about themselves and other people have nothing? It's like we're all going to starve. None of the companies are going to make any sales at all.
Yeah, and it's so interesting how quick we cling to a false certainty about whether even in a relationship with someone else, like we think we know, interacting with this person is going to be better than interacting with this person. So we go into all these situations with ideas of how they're going to play out, how they should play out, how they might play out, how we want them to play out, with no actual idea. So all it does in wanting something to play out in a specific way is hindering our ability to see how it's playing out and maybe garner some insights, or see things from a different point of view, or having a new insight arise, because we're holding on so tightly to the way we want something to go. And so we're not even willing to see certain people because they don't fit that idea that we have of the right person to interact with, or the right way to do something. Meanwhile, for that, in this situation, like, they see this guy eating and they don't think anything of him. They can treat him like shit. And meanwhile, there's probably, including you, man, a bunch of people who see that interaction and they're like, fuck that noise. And someone else who may have, if they had been super empathetic towards him, there might have been someone who's like a fucking rich businessman walking by and been willing to offer some insight, or like invest, or you never know how something's going to play out. And so the best thing you can do is remain empathetic, remain relaxed, continue to pay attention, and find out. Gives you the best opportunity. You don't know how that's going to play out either. There's no certainty in that, but at least you're giving yourself a fighting chance. When you're acting like a fucking asshole to everyone, it's like you're shooting yourself in the foot over and over and over and over, giving yourself almost no chance to figure anything out, and yet still thinking that it's going to get it figured out.
I know. And they don't know that my first job ever was McDonald's, and I was employee of the month, and I was in a top performing store. So like, I actually could have been the right person who could have been giving them direct experience about what they were going to. Not only that, but I have a bachelor's degree in business management and marketing, and I have a high emotional intelligence. So I literally was probably the most serendipitous person to be in their store at the time of their meeting. And yet I felt the opposite of wanting to help them, because they wouldn't be able to take my advice and digest it anyway. So I already knew it was going to be a waste of my time to tell them, prioritize relationships over profit. And I promise you'll see dividends way higher than when you only look at people and see dollar bills, and instead you see relationships. And what's so funny about sales is that most of the time it's 20% of your market that provides you with 80% of your profit. It's a small group of people that actually give you the biggest ROI, the return on your investment. So you don't need to get more customers. You just need to deepen your relationship with your loyal customers. And those loyal customers are going to be the ones who make your business grow. They're going to be advocating for you. They're going to be telling you their friends, their family. They're going to be buying more from your company. So you don't need more relationships, you need better quality relationships. And that's so funny that so many business professionals don't see that.
No, because the temptation is always more, right? The temptation is always more. And this is part of our egotistical mentality. Like, there's this superficial evidence of success and it's greater numbers, right? Whereas the reality of success is actually greater depth, which means less focus on those numbers, right? If there is any kind of monumental change, it's a result of the ripple itself, not so much as a focus on the result of the ripple, right? And so, yeah, we miss that for sure. And instead we try to focus on everyone else when it's really us. It's really us, like the companies that are going to do better especially as, see, this is kind of the thing, right? Like, a lot of our businesses are frankly catering to our current mentality. They've learned to do so. Advertising, right? Marketers as an industry go to school to learn how to manipulate the way that we've been thinking. It has nothing to do with the changing way that we are thinking, right? And so that's it, is that these businesses are eventually going to have to learn how to modify how they interact with people, because people's priorities and needs are going to change as they start to let go of the illusion. I mean, I'm way less susceptible to give into an ad. And I mean, like, way less susceptible. Like, it's got to be a pretty good ad, and it's got to be about something that's like, that aligns with everything else in my life. It's like, yeah, this thing is great for the environment, helps people out, costs almost nothing at all. It's easy for everyone to get, and it solves a daily problem for you that you could do yourself. So you don't really need this, but you could buy it. And in which case I'm like, hell yeah, that's great. But where it's just like, you're going to be a better person for this. I'm like, that's hilarious. Right. And so eventually companies are going to have to start modifying to that. And it's going to be the companies that are going back to integrity that we're going to resonate with. The ones who are just like, no, we're making sure that this comes, from a place where they're not using slave labor. It's like, oh, immediately I'm more interested. And why? Well, because I'm changing as a person, and there's a lot more of that. Unfortunately, then that becomes a fad too, but that is also just a process in our rising collective awareness.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how marketers shift their push away from that immediate, just you're more valuable because you own this, basically. Like, we've gotten so fucking shallow with that shit. Like, there's very little, the function doesn't even have to be there. The utility, it just has to be have a fucking brand on it that doesn't cost anything to have the label on it. It's just what it is. And like, there's so much just egotistical, like value driven, like perceived value attached to certain brands and holding on to that. And it's just so shallow. But in regards to the breadth versus depth conversation, I was kind of thinking about it in the sense that, when we focus on breadth over depth, it's like there's very little depth, and you can just say you want to build a really wide hole, and you could do that and have a lot of breadth with very little depth. But if you want to build a deep hole, it's like you dig deeper, but the deeper you get, you have to kind of subtly start making it wider in order to keep going deeper. And so when you prioritize the depth, you keep going deeper and the breadth follows. But when it's just the breadth, then there's no depth whatsoever, and it's just shallow as shit.
I gotta say, that was good.
Thanks.
And I love it, because if you take this in a literal context, when you dig deeper and you don't expand the hole, you increase the risk of the walls collapsing in on that hole. And so you end up creating higher risk with a lower return. And then it gives you more work, because then all of a sudden now you have to start excavating again, because this hole can't get deeper because your walls are collapsing. So fantastic analogy, Andrew. You're killing it. I love it. I love it. That was awesome. And I am interested to see how marketing is going to change, because it's going to have to be, it's going to have to adapt, because it needs to be meaningful. And you can sense when someone is being meaningful with you, or when someone is just using you as a means to an end. And you can tell that. And so I've worked in sales, and my best days were always the days where I was open to someone else's needs, and I wasn't just looking looking at the customer as a box to check. It was like, hey, how are you? What brought you in today? How have you been doing? More so of like, instead of what are you looking for, why are you looking for it? Can you let me know a little bit about what's going on? What inspired you to want this product? Is there a certain goal or a dream that's attached to it, versus just let me get you the biggest, most elaborate bundle that you could get for the low payment of whatever, It's just, it was always, when I connected with the person, they were always more open to my advice and my expertise, and for me to guide them, because they trusted that I had their best interest at heart, versus just using them as another box to check.
Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the reasons I find it really funny, because our movie review series, we could easily, if we were focused on traffic and getting as much, as many audience members as we could, do just the latest movies. We could just go and do whatever's the biggest in the cinema and cover that movie and talk about whatever in the same generic kind of movie review format. And instead we go and pick sometimes these really obscure or old movies that people don't remember at all, and we dredge them up and we watch them, and then we talk about the insights that resonate with our life, because we know that there's an impact there. We actually choose these movies because of the impact that they have. And so there's the reason that we're sharing it. It's not just like we got to share this to get some content out there and really drive up the numbers. Like it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the kind of person who's going to resonate with that conversation. This is something that I always get a kick out of. We get this on Instagram all the time. It's like, well, you guys aren't necessarily always pleasant. You're going to lose a lot of traffic. You're going to lose a lot of number of audience members for that. It's like, yeah, weak ones who are fragile and judgmental and are running from change, in which case, good fucking riddance.
Yeah, we're gonna lose the little bitches. That's all we're losing. But it's so funny, and I actually put it on my story highlights. It doesn't make any sense to just want followers for the sake of having followers. And especially when, you're pushing people, like for me with my content, it's just pushing people to the podcast, and Ray the same way, is getting people to the podcast. And so if there's people who are just there for the content and they're like hesitant about it, and they're like, oh, this stuff makes me feel good, but this stuff makes me uncomfortable, it's like, you can leave, like there's the door, you can hop off, because there isn't, like, there's something happening here. And it's not just for us about having individuals, it's about a depth with individuals. And that's the thing too, is you connect more deeply with people, even just from a business perspective. It's like they have a bunch of connections. And so the deeper you dig into them, the more you see the connections that they have. But when everyone's just this surface level sort of thing, there's no depth, and then there's no additional network that's built from that. When you really go deep and get involved with someone and do a lot of things that incorporate them and give them opportunities, like they're more likely to share things and talk to other people about it. As they start to shift, they're more willing to have the conversation. And the beauty of all of this is it's just a conversation. So if it gets to the point where a lot of people are having the conversation spreads. And the more people having the conversation, like it takes two to tango, it takes two to have the conversation. And it takes, oftentimes it's more than two. And so that expands, and that's the network effect. But the more you focus on the depth of that, the more likely that expansion is going to happen. But if you're focused on the breadth, it's just like that sort of shallow focus that doesn't actually have the lasting impact. You don't dig in, you don't build any roots with that if it's solely focused on the superficial, on the numbers, on things. And if that's how you're thinking of people, that's how they're going to respond. And that's how it's going to end up playing out. And so, yeah, maybe you could have a lot of people interacting, but at what depth? At very little depth. There's very little roots being taken. And then as soon as things maybe shift, it's like they run away. As soon as there's a little bit that they find a little bit uncomfortable, they run, as opposed to digging in more and more deeply.
It's true. And, I'm glad that we are not opening a Dualistic Unity daycare. I really appreciate that, because especially in my opinion, in America, we don't need more coddling. We have a reputation for being like the coddling nation, that all we do is say sorry because you think you're supposed to, or you think that you're always supposed to make people feel pleasant. And so I'm leaving this trip, right? And on this trip, I had a conversation with the person that I was running around with, and I was like, I don't know if you've noticed, but like, I'm not here to coddle you. Like, I'm not here to make you feel better. Like, I'm here with you. What do you want to do with that? Because I'm not your mother, and I'm not your therapist, and I'm not here to make you feel better. But I will be honest with you. I will share space with you. And if you think that I don't, I have the capacity to leave at any time. So if I'm still here, it must be because I want to be. Right. So if you keep thinking about why am I here, and how do I feel about you, and how do I feel about this whole situation, it's like, I'm still here. That should be evidence enough that I want to be here. And now it's on you. The ball is in your court. You let me know, because if you think that I'm always supposed to be pleasant, good luck with that concept, because like, you're not always going to like me, and I'm not always going to like you. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to be here with you just because you sometimes annoy me. Like, that's just a part of it. And I felt the same way, vice versa. Like, I'm annoying sometimes. Like, heads up, everybody. I'm not always nice. I'm not always pleasant. I'm not always fun to be around. But you know what I will always be is honest with you. And you don't have to worry if the advice I give you is genuine, or if the time that I spend with you is time that I want to spend. Because I hope that my actions speak louder than nice words that you really want me to tell you.
Well said. Absolutely. And we forget the kind of like momentary feelings, are something that pass, but relationships are long-term experiences. And so if you're letting this experience right now have a reflection over the whole thing, it's kind of like letting one note in a song really ruin the song for you, and you may as well just look at the whole context of it. Amanda, we have to let you go because we have somebody in the queue. But before you go, I wanted you to know that at the moment, I am waiting for a delivery for our random number generator from the Heart Math Institute. which of course is the Global Consciousness Project, which was originally started by a professor at Princeton University, I believe in the 90s or the 80s. And Dualistic Unity is now a part of that. So I just wanted you to know that the delivery is on its way. And so I will probably tell you tomorrow in the Patreon group that it has arrived and it is randomly generating numbers.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I am literally jumping for joy in front of all these people. I could give two shits how they feel about me. I am so happy. I cannot contain it. The joy is here to be experienced and shared. And I am absolutely thrilled because, you know, everybody, this is the Amanda Show, and we've got one member in the audience and one member on the stage. So we're having the best time because we can. So thank you for sharing that update. I'm so glad. And I will keep watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the show. And I will see you guys tomorrow. I love you. I love you all so much.
We love you, Amanda. Thanks so much for tuning in and kicking off this call-in show. Have a safe flight. And
that's pretty
fuck
exciting.
Yeah.
Right? A
Fuck
lot of
yeah.
energy there. Jesus Christ. And got to say, you know, this is the reason that Amanda is our administrative coordinator because, you know, frankly, she's just got so much drive and she keeps us on our toes. And so we really appreciate that. We have another person in the queue, and I do want to remind everyone in the audience right now that if you would like to join us in approximately 10 minutes, because everybody gets approximately 10 minutes, just go to dualisticunity.com/live and you will be in the queue. Julia is going to join us, and Julia would like to discuss empathy, trauma, and coping mechanisms in and out of the workplace. So this is a really good conversation in general, and I'm curious to see which direction it goes in first.
I'm very excited. Find out. Julia, hello. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing great.
Doing very well. Doing very well. I'm glad
Sorry,
you
it's
could
a
join
bit. I did hear your introduction, but then it cut off a little bit, so a little bit off put here. But definitely wanted to talk about some things and join you for this call.
Oh yeah. I know you put your summary in the chat, but feel free to take it away with whatever you wanted to chat about.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking of touching upon empathy, trauma, and coping, and just how that relates to how we view ourselves as individuals and the illusion of duality. I am somebody who's actually experienced emotional and mental abuse from a relationship in the past. And I know it's vulnerable to put that on the table, but I find it very difficult sometimes in how I view other people, because I've always been very deep-rooted, had a very deep-rooted sense of empathy. I had actually viewed myself and other people since a very young age. So I'm just curious on your thoughts about the point of empathy where you do things for other people and you barely separate them from yourself. I feel like it can get a little bit dangerous when some people are too empathetic.
I think it comes down to a deepening recognition of what empathy is. And I think that comes with maturity itself, right? Like when you're a teenager, for example, empathy to you is for somebody just to give you everything you want, right? Just agree with you and validate you and make you feel good all the time. You're like, that's empathy as a teenager. But then you get a little older and you start realizing that actually the hard times, people telling me shit I didn't want to hear, you know, people being honest with me when and not necessarily catering to my preferences, that was really empathy. It's like, you know, you realize like your parents were pissing you off because they love you, you know, that kind of thing to some degree. It depends on the parents. But the point is that you see empathy differently. And so now you're acting differently in terms of what empathy is. And so I think it does change over time, but there is a danger in getting stuck, especially if you're just looking for validation yourself. Then your idea of empathy is going to be very superficial.
Yeah, at one point I threw in a little meme in the Discord that like you can get so empathetic where you don't know where one person begins and the other person ends. So it's almost like when I was in that abusive relationship, I kind of made that person's life my life, and I lost myself in that way. So it's almost like I was just spectating them and kind of doing everything for them and trying to change them, which I know now is not really the best approach to people who behave in those ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a balancing act, and I think it's and this is the tough thing about things like this in the realm of uncertainty and the recognition that like control doesn't exist, is that like empathy is a recognition that, you know, comes down to a recognition that if you were in their shoes, you would do the same thing, like seeing yourself in them. But it doesn't also come with like a set of guidelines of then how to act on top of that. And so just in that example of kind of losing yourself in a situation, not same exact example by any means, but when I was in college, my senior year, I was one of the like sort of team leaders, and I was just very focused on like team camaraderie, like focused on the team. And I was also, you know, playing on the team and starting and everything, and played a big role on the team. And I found like I didn't start the season off very well because I was so focused on how the team was doing that I almost like forgot that I was also the team. You know, I built this whole idea of the team and like was being very empathetic and there for like the younger kids, making sure they're having a good time, and like very much focused on that. And I kind of lost that side where I was like, oh shit, I'm actually not playing great, and that's not helping the team either. So then I had to pull back on my focus on everyone else, start focusing, you know, doing some of my own stuff, practicing on my own, and then was able to bring that up. And so for me, it was like, yeah, there was a lot of empathy in that, and feeling things, but there was also a balance to be found, because if you go too far, you lose yourself, and then it's like your cup is draining. You're like poking a hole in your cup to fill someone else's, as opposed to utilizing your overflowing cup and the extra water that you have to help someone else's, not because it's filling your own cup, but just because you have some extra energy to spare. And so, but again, it's a balance that's found from getting overly involved in someone else, and then coming back and realizing, oh, maybe focusing on myself a little bit more. Oh, maybe I'm focusing on myself a little bit too much. Maybe I have some spare, you know, water to work with now, and I can help someone else out. But it's always that balancing act that you go back and forth between.
And I think that kind of goes back to like, I've heard that the ego can sometimes be like protective in a way, because it's like just for survival, right? Like in survival mode versus creation mode. And like sometimes it may be necessary to focus on yourself if other people are being harmful towards you. Like if you take the deer being chased by like a lion or whatever, you know, you're going to obviously in some scenarios have to look out for yourself, even if we are all connected.
Yeah, the recognition of unity doesn't come with guidelines. It doesn't say, oh, you recognize yourself in them, and therefore you do this. It's like, no, there's none of that. It's just you recognize yourself in them, and that's also not what you think, because you and them aren't what you think. So it changes in the sense that you're more empathetic, but it also doesn't really change anything. It's still you interacting with reality, just the perspective shifts a little bit. And I think that's something that's super important to keep in mind, that a lot of people forget oftentimes, is that, you know, with spirituality, with the recognition of unity, and like, I mean, spirituality is a whole nother thing. And there is in spirituality kind of a belief system that comes along with that. And this idea of like a right way to be spiritual. And it's buying into that, because it's giving this false certainty that if I just do these things, if I just act in this way, if I'm just a good person, whatever the fuck that means, then I'll be good. Then people like me. Then I'll go to heaven. Then I'll be accepted, you know, whatever it may be. But there's none of that. There is no right way. But through like recognizing that the concepts aren't true, through recognizing that, you know, your idea of what you think is best may not be what's best, you come closer and closer to what's actually real, as opposed to a conceptual idea of what the best thing is. And that's all we can do, is get closer and closer and closer to that. But we're not getting to a certainty. We're not getting to a spot of control where we just know, and then we just do that, and then it's all good. We don't know. We can come closer to, gaining more perspectives and taking in more perspectives that allows us to get closer to, the not the right answer, but maybe the best answer.
Yeah, I would say that, again, my idea of empathy has changed over time. And I think that what I mean by that is that I no longer think my idea of empathy is empathy, right? Like there are occasions when you are dealing with somebody and they're pushing your boundaries, and you, more often than not, you think to yourself, what should I do here, instead of what you feel you should do there. And it's because we second guess. We're like, this isn't empathetic. It's like, no, but it's a natural response, which is trying to reestablish some equilibrium, right? And that's really what we're trying to do. And we hold that shit back because we're like, that's not the right response. And it's often because of all the cultural conditioning. It's because of all that stuff that we've been told. Like, empathy is this. This is why I've often said that compassion taken far enough becomes fascism. Is because, you can take something that's beautiful and it becomes an idea, and all of a sudden it's actually a prison.
Sure.
I am very grateful that you brought this up, though. It's important, especially, and I wanted to bring this back to something you said in your comment, in and out of the workplace, because that's where it's especially difficult, because as we were discussing with Amanda, there is this mentality that you are forced to work within. And that mentality is the bottom line, right? Basically, you're focused on the money, you're focused on the service or the product. And so there's this hierarchy, and that hierarchy immediately creates almost this lack of value to anybody below you. Like, you start to perceive them differently, and so your behavior towards them becomes different as a result of that. And so that's all stuff you have to keep in mind. And frankly, most people don't. They just don't.
Yeah.
And so at that point, your immediate reaction is to tell that person off. But how do you do that when you might lose your job? Right. So there's that leap of faith again. It's in recognizing that you'll find another job more than likely if you're willing to just, step outside of your comfort zone. It's like, but I don't like that job. It's like, well, do you like working for somebody who treats you like this?
Yeah, that uncertainty, I guess, blocks you off from all the rest of the potential that there could be, like you've talked about a lot. I know I'm still a little bit behind in the podcast and then jumping back on here, but do you have any more specific thoughts about, I guess, people pleasing? I know that people pleasing is what people do when they're stuck in the ego. Just general thoughts, I guess, about that.
No, yeah.
We actually have a community topics episode. Community topics number 24 is actually about people pleasing and spiral dynamics. So you might enjoy that. It's a whole episode basically on the idea of people pleasing and how we can work with it and what it really comes down to, and some of the things that help us stop doing it. So I think you'll enjoy it.
One interesting concept I want to bring up too that I just thought of is when I was younger, trying to figure out what love meant, or like the term of having like a crush. I pretty much went through a phase where I thought I liked everyone. I'm just curious what you think about that, because I do think, like, even though I know my idea of empathy isn't really what empathy is, I know it's just a word, but like I feel like in a way I almost saw myself in them, and like I would always find the good in people, and then that kind of led me up to the emotional and physically abusive relationship that I was in for too long.
That's totally fair. I do love everyone, but again, my idea of love is not the reality of love. Love is just acceptance without condition, which means it's not just looking for the good in people, right? Because usually that's because we're looking at the good in ourselves strictly, and so that's all we want to see in other people as well. And so loving people means recognizing that they're just as frail and insecure and fragile as we are, and loving them for that without needing to change it. And so that's more of an acceptance, and then that one takes a long time, because you still have to observe the benefits of boundaries, right? Because love doesn't mean not having boundaries, because boundaries are helpful for both parties.
Yeah, exactly. And with those things and how they play out, and with I just had a thought and I forgot it. What was the question again, Julia?
I'll let Ray take over for a minute.
We were more or less talking about boundaries at work and the hierarchy and all of that in terms of,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, with and people pleasing and yeah, with how
I loved everyone. I said that as well.
yes,
I felt
that yes, that it was that one. Thank you. And because I think there's always the potential, right? Like everyone has that potential. Everyone has the potential to let down their walls, and it's just how willing they are. But that's not up to us either. And so it's almost like I'm sure you in that spot like saw the potential that everyone had, and in spots of vulnerability, in spots where they're not maintaining those walls and all the shit that they think is protecting them, but really is just cutting them off from the rest of themselves. Like you were able to see what's really behind that, what's underneath all of those layers, what's underneath all of those conceptual ideas of their ideas of the way the world should be and the way they think they are and the right way to live and the right way to act. Because beyond all of those opinions, like we're the same blank slate that build a lot of shit on top of it based on experiences. And so everyone has that potential and you can see that, but there's, again, it's that balance. It doesn't mean that, the right way. And that's the thing with the whole love and light community. It's like loving everyone doesn't necessarily mean what you think it means. You don't know always what it means. Sometimes loving someone, doing what's best for them is being harsh, is not enabling them to continue taking the destructive actions that they're taking and not allowing them to continue to do so or not supporting them in something that's detrimental to their experience, despite it not feeling good. It's like the difference between feeling better and getting better. It's in the moment. It might feel awful, but oftentimes that's, reality coming around. Reality comes around and smacks you in the face, and that never feels good. But oftentimes it's what you need when you're caught up in some bullshit. And so that experience of love, we get very caught up in trying to define it and saying that, love is this, love is that. Love isn't what you think, as Ray said. It's acceptance without precondition. That's all that it is, which isn't really something to settle upon, because then there's no control in that. There's no certainty. There's no like, oh, well, I should treat them this way. It's like there is no this way. It's how attentive you are to the experience, how sensitive you are to the experience, and that then plays out. And you kind of find out what the best way to interact with them is as you start interacting with them with that sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
Apologies, I had to go to the door.
No worries. So, yeah, it's fantastic questions, though, Julia. Did you have any others you wanted to touch on, or did that pretty much cover? I think that was everything you had in the summary.
That pretty much covered it. I mean, one other thing is just that I didn't grow up religious coming to the insights. Like, I don't know if you have any questions for me, like with the way that I've come to the podcast and similar realizations, but without Christianity. Like, I haven't really, I guess, explained like my whole upbringing and whatever, but I don't know if you have any questions for me, but
we definitely do, but I think we're going to cover them in one of our groups, because I know that you have joined us on Patreon, and I look forward to discussing that with you there. We do want to encourage people, call in if you'd like to get into the queue. But Julia, I do have to say this has been a fantastic conversation. I look forward to talking to you more often.
Yeah,
thank you
Julia,
for having me.
Thanks so much for hopping in. This is a blast. Awesome. She's great. That was a lot of fun. I like the questions. As always, what you got there? Oh, is that it? Oh, shoot. Uh-oh. Ray has a surprise for everyone. Oh, wow. Look at that. Damn. That is sick. So is that the egg? right
That's
there.
That is
Wow.
good. Wow, that is pretty swag. It even says Global Consciousness Project 2.0. It's very exciting.
Fuck
Thank
yeah.
you to Amanda, who made this shit happen by reaching out to the Global Consciousness Project after having a conversation about their existence on our Patreon groups. And thank you to the community who has been so supportive as we've continued on through 5 seasons. And now we're involved with this, which is fantastic. This is going to be great. I'm going to work on setting this up later on this evening. And then we'll be randomly generating numbers while we get into alternate states of consciousness. I'm very excited.
Yeah, it's gonna be a blast playing with that thing. And it's staying at your house, right? It has to stay plugged in at all times. Cool. So what do you know, like that the thing that's like the octagon thing, like what that is exact? Like I know it's a random number generator.
No, that's it. It's actually it's 4.
Okay.
There are 4 random number generators in there. And that's pretty much what it does. And it's the reason that it's in my general geography is because it's basically resonating not just with me, but with everybody who's around me.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not just like in my office, but I wonder about the effect of that, just because, again, I am almost certain that we have an impact just on places that we identify with. Like, I think that when we start to identify with a certain city and a certain state, we actually do tap into a collective mentality of all the people who are also identifying with that city and or state. And so I have to wonder that if there will even be some impact on the random number generator when I'm not here, by virtue of the fact that this is my office and I very much perceive it that way as my space or a reflection of my own awareness. And so I have to wonder about stuff like that. But for everybody who's wondering, the random number generator is a part of the Global Consciousness Project, which was started in the 80s or 90s by a professor at Princeton University. I kind of talked about this earlier. What they are trying to observe is the relationship between the observer and the observed, essentially. And so their premise is that the randomness of reality does in fact gain randomness and lose randomness according to coherence, according to our alignment with reality. And that in large collective events, there is a measurable impact upon the randomness of these generators. And so their biggest example of this would be right before 9/11. Right before 9/11, like a lot of these random number generators around the world suddenly became a great deal less random. They've also observed the same phenomenon in large groups of people meditating. And so there is something. We don't know what it is. They don't know what it is. They've been looking at it for 30 years and they've just upgraded to new devices that are more sensitive and generate more random numbers. And so they're basically taking in all of this data and then they're going to do queries later on. And I'm very curious about that. Like for me, especially, I would like to see the random number generator, not just this one, but for people in the community who managed to get one later on. Because again, this is something that they've just released the first batch. They're going to be behind for a little while. We were lucky to get one of the first batch because again, of Amanda. But what I would like to see later on is there a modification to the randomness when we're in our groups? When we're deeply invested in a group discussion where we start to actually feel high, as it were, simply because of the state of mind that we're allowing ourselves to get in there into, is there some measurable impact? And that's only going to be something that we can look at after years of collecting data, right? But it's nice that we can actually look back and know what our schedule has been so that way we can query that data later on in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very interesting to see how that continues to play out, especially in those spots where it's multiple people, even, and like if the impact can span, distance, like quote unquote distance, because you'll be interacting with people even if they're not in your office with you. It's like the mentality is still there, the connection is still there, the conversation is still there and happening, and how much it makes me wonder how much just having the conversation with a large group of people, even via Zoom, shifts things and what's going on, what's happening. And if it doesn't shift things in between, the distances, like right now we're very, very far apart. I'm on the East Coast of the US, you're on the West Coast of Canada. And if there isn't something in between impacting.
We know the universe is non-local.
Yeah.
So the fact is, there is no actual distance between you and I.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a great point.
Perceptually, from the point of view of the observer, which is fantastic. Right. So yeah, there's a lot in terms of this study and what it could lead to later on. I know they have a bunch of other stuff that they're working on as well. And so we are very, very excited to be involved with that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I also wanted to thank everybody who's called in so far. We really appreciate that. If anybody else would like to call in, you can do so at dualisticunity.com/live. That's pretty much it. After this, we are going to be on Patreon for an hour and a half. It's a tier 2 call tonight. We kind of look at it as the call-in show, or occasionally the roundtable after party. We just shoot the breeze and we explore different insights. Sometimes we catch up to date with what some of the community members are doing. And, we're just there for one another. It really is quite the experience. I was talking to one of the candidates for this position that we have open right now the other day. And I was just saying that, after 20 plus years of just seeing this just for myself, because all of this stuff that I talk about in terms of like, it has to be for you. This all came from me, making it for me, and this is why I walked away from telling people about this stuff for a long time, because who am I trying to tell? Who's it for? Right. And so it's so surreal after all of that time to suddenly come out of, my comfortable little existence as being a father on the edge of this town and kind of like the wilderness, when, homeschooling my kid and all that stuff, to suddenly just come into the world and all of you just come out of the fucking woodwork, and I didn't go looking for you. And so all of this is surreal to see all of this just picking up momentum and to see all of you experiencing such incredible change in your life. That's really it. Like, to me, the proof is in the pudding. You can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? Like you're talking to people about spirituality and chakras and shit while you yourself are having a fucking meltdown because they don't have a gelato, like that kind of thing. And it's just, the proof is in the pudding. And to me, this has all got to be fucking applicable. It has to actually come down to something that's going to have a measurable effect on your life. If you just have the courage to face it, if you just have the courage to take it in, which is the difference between going, yeah, I know I'm not being judged. Yeah, I know people aren't really thinking about me that way. I'm just getting carried away with my thoughts, but it hurts and I'm going to continue to do so, versus, and I can take this pain. I really just need to fucking take this in. But it's more importantly that I can take this pain. I can take this suffering. I don't need to run from this. I need to look at it for what it is, which is based on my assumptions. That's all it is. It's based on assumptions and habits. And I'd rather have that assumption than let go and admit that I don't fucking know, because then I'm just left with me. And if I don't feel valuable, that's not enough. And so that's what we're always avoiding. I don't know how I got on that rant, but I'm glad I did.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable to realize when you do recognize that, oh, maybe the pain won't immediately go away from understanding this. But at the same time, like, the psychological pain you're going through, those feelings stem from you. They always stem from you having an expectation, making an assumption, maintaining an idea that someone should do something or someone shouldn't do something. It's like, where's that coming from? It's coming from you. Always. It's always stemming from you, because you're it. Like, you're the only thing. Like, and so when it comes to doing it for you, like, it's the only thing you can ever do. As long as you're doing it for someone else, it's like, why? Where's that coming from? It's coming from, I guess, a desire to not be alone in the experience, but we sacrifice that experience of, or the willingness to be alone, for the feeling that we're not, and all the consequences that come with that, and all of the pain that comes with that. Like, all of our investments in the perception of division, like all of our investments in the idea that we're not alone, have consequences. Like, on whatever I don't want to say level, but like at whatever point you're willing to recognize that, like, you are alone in your experience. Like, the things you go through, the experience, like your responses to things, like, they're on you. it's not about how someone else is acting. And it's interesting when people expect people to act in certain ways. Like, where the fuck does that path end? With everyone acting exactly as you want them to? And where does that go? You're just controlling everything, and then there's no variability, and you take that all the way to the extreme, and then you'll start to wish there was some variability very, very, very quickly. You'll start to wish, because if if you take that far enough and you're like, oh, well, tomorrow I want to know exactly what everyone's going to think of me. I want to know exactly how everyone's going to respond to me. I don't feel great and I wish they would treat me this way. And then they start doing that. And it's like every wish is your command. And you play that out and you play that for long enough. Like, well, fuck, this isn't it. This certainly isn't it. I need some variability in this. It would get tiring so quick, but we think that's the answer. But really, the shift is on you. The shift is on us. Like, drop those expectations. Why do you have those expectations? You don't need them. And the reality, it's so funny because the reality of how they play out when you expect people to act in certain ways, to respond in certain ways, they feel that. They can absolutely feel that. You can't hide those expectations. As reasonable as you may think that they are. Like, well, it just makes sense that this would happen if this would happen. Based on your perspective, based on your logic. Oh, it's a logical thing for someone to play out in a certain way based on you. It's not, that doesn't exist as like this overarching societal thing. It's always just stemming from you. And it's very important to recognize that. It can be uncomfortable at first. It's something that a lot of people will avoid, but there's consequences that come with it. And the reality of how it plays out isn't how you think it does. Like, people meeting expectations is going to set you up for a life full of suffering if you're constantly expecting that, because it's not going to happen. It just can't possibly happen because people don't know what they are always. So of course it's stemming from you. It always is.
And because of that, we don't recognize that the strength goes where we put it. And what I mean is that if you look at your emotions as being strong or as being really influential, that your emotions push and pull you, and that you are at basically at their whim, then your decisions will have very little impact because you're always going to be swayed by your emotions. Whereas if you were to look at the power of your decisions, well, all of a sudden you'd realize that you can make decisions despite your emotions. You can feel depressed and still choose to do something. You can feel sad or you can feel afraid and still choose to move forward or to address those things. And that's the thing, is in empowering yourself and empowering the decision itself. But it's easier to rely on other people and the validation of other people. Especially, it's easy to just get invested in the narrative. Like, if all of this happens, then I can feel okay. It's like, you can feel okay right now. You're just using all of that as justification. Right now, I'm okay to make a decision that I'm okay because all of these things are correct, as opposed to, well, I could have done that at any point. It just would require me to let go of all the shit that I perceive myself to need. Like that person to like me, like this item in my house, like, this particular, degree or whatever it might be. Like, all of that stuff, if it's coming from need, it's taking away from everything. But that really, it's kind of funny when you look at it for what it is. Like, we just get really carried away with something that we're creating for ourselves. We just don't recognize that we're creating it for ourselves, right? Because it seems so real. And of course it does, because it's us and we are reality.
Yeah, the recognition that you can do something despite how you feel, like you don't need the feeling to be there before you make the choice, is so freeing and so powerful and so impactful. Like, because then you start to realize the more you do that, the more actions you take despite how you feel, despite your emotions being all fucked up and awry, you can make a decision or take an action, and that action itself shifts the feelings. It starts to shift the emotions. It's not the other way around. It's not that you get to a point where the emotions are perfect. You just feel amazing, and then you do the thing. It's like the motivation cycle. We think that motivation is just something that just comes out of nowhere, pops out into our room, and it's like, we're lying in our bed doing nothing. We want to just fucking, I don't know, go to the gym. And we're like, oh, I'm just going to lie here until motivation hits me, till it comes around and just overwhelms me. And then I'm going to be motivated. And then I'm going to go to the gym, and then I'm going to start feeling good and blah, 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 blah. And you can use any example, but the reality of how that plays out is you got to take the action first. You go to the gym, and then the motivation comes. Maybe when you get there, maybe it comes 30 minutes in, and maybe it never comes. But it's you can't rely upon the motivation. You can't rely upon the shift in emotion. It's like that's where we play our role in, as Ray said, in being reality itself. It's not that everything's happening to us. We're happening to everything simultaneously. It's both all the time. Your reality as much as your environment. You are as much a component of everything that is, as much as able to influence everything that you're going through as anything else in your environment. And so it's always a two-way street. But if you're waiting for someone else to come around and make you feel good, it's like you could be waiting for eternity. You could be waiting forever for that feeling. It's like, is that really a life you want to live? Or you can say, fuck that noise. I'm not going to wait around. I'm going to go do this thing despite how shitty I'm feeling right now or how down I'm feeling. And you can do that. And that's the thing that starts the shift, because you shift your environment, you shift the things that you're doing. You're not allowing yourself to be so caught up in your head trying to figure it out. You're just doing shit. And the things shift, the thoughts shift, the feelings shift with that. But it's on you to take that step. It's on you to make that shift. You can't wait around for someone else to do it for you, because there's a very, very good chance they're never going to show.
It's so important to remember habit as a mechanism there, because I mean, the more you give into your fear, the more you give into your narrative, the more you do that, the more you're training yourself to do that. And so every time you respond to your emotions and you're just like, oh my God, they're massive, they become bigger perceptually. They become harder to deal with as you continue to do that, because you're reinforcing that perception habitually. And the same is true in the other direction. The more you let go of your narrative, the more that you perceive your emotions as something that is part of your experience, but certainly not stronger than you, since they come from you. Well, the more you're reinforcing that, the more you're reinforcing the recognition that you have influence, because you're exercising it, which means that you're proving all of your doubts wrong. And that is stepping you further and further out of the narrative. But it really is, it's both a gift and a curse. Like your brain will pick up either direction and try and reinforce it. So it really comes down to, what are you encouraging yourself to learn? Right? Which means it's not about one decision. It's about the decision over and over and over again. Like you're growing a tree in a certain direction, either towards the sunlight or towards the darkness.
Yeah. And so it just comes down to focus and attention. Are you paying attention to the narrative inside of your mind, or are you paying attention to what's actually happening? Because the more you pay attention to the narrative and the story and what should be happening and the right thing that should be happening, the way people should be acting, you're missing everything that's happening. And you can be in a situation that would actually shift your life and be so caught up in your head about what's the right thing to be happening that you miss the thing that's happening that would allow the things to shift. And it's insane how often we do that. But it really does just come down to that focus. Like, what are you giving attention to? Are you giving attention to bullshit, or are you giving attention to reality? And that's the spectrum. And it's on you. There's not a guarantee one way or the other. It shifts moment to moment, but it's just a continuation. And the more you get caught in your head, the more you focus on that, thinking that that's going to figure everything out, waiting for someone else to do something, which is just based on the idea that they should be acting any other way than they are. That starts to get reinforced, and then that becomes a sort of spiral there. But that's the beauty, is that the more you pay attention to reality, the more you find out, the more you realize, oh, spending so much time caught up in bullshit in my head doesn't actually do anything. Things are actually happening here. Starts to make more and more sense. But for a lot of us, I think we never even pay attention to reality. And so we don't even give ourselves the opportunity to allow for that jump to start happening. Like we're so deep in our head, in our mind, in conceptual thoughts that we don't even make the jump to paying attention to reality. There's people who probably don't pay attention to reality for a single moment their entire life almost, or at least very, very, very few. So they don't even give themselves a chance to start on that trajectory, start finding out the benefits of just paying attention to what's actually happening. Because that's where things are actually happening. That's where you find things out. That's where you're able to let go of the shit. Because it's not even a letting go of the shit. It's just shifting your attention to realize that that shit was only there because you were giving it attention. It's still there. It's still back there somewhere, but it's just not in your purview. It's not overwhelming you. It's not impacting your moment-to-moment experience in the same way because you shifted your focus to what's actually real.
See, and it's so tricky. Like right there, you can see where the problem is, because as soon as we say you just have to focus on reality, our brain goes, well, what's reality? And that's not it. And that's immediately where we get stuck, right? It's like, oh, I just got to work on myself. And your brain's like, but what are we? And that's not it. We forget that the problem that we have, especially in terms of mental health, is that we've stepped farther and farther and farther away from the point of just allowing ourselves to be what we are, so that way we can exercise awareness and empathy and grow in the most efficient way possible. Because it's in having that space to breathe, having that feeling of safety within ourselves, having that ability of capability and ability that we can adapt. And that's where we actually learn. So it's in lacking those things that a lot of our mental health problems come from, educationally, developmentally, and so on, right? Because we don't feel like we can be ourselves. And then over time, that habit twists into what we would commonly call a disorder, right? But we forget that the disorder was never the problem. It was the lack of space and safety in the present moment to just be what you are that started stunting your growth, that started making it harder for you to feel aligned with reality, to respond in an authentic way without judging yourself, because you got lost in concepts, because that's all you can judge are concepts. And so it's so tricky when we're so far in the shit to recognize that, because we forget that we are the present. We forget that it's the reality. We're like, well, what does that mean? And immediately we're out of it. And the best thing you can do is just breathe. Just breathe. Just feel your body, feel the wind on your face, and trust that your brain is still processing that shit. It does not need you to think about it. It doesn't need you to get in there and go, what's happening? What does it mean about me? Because that's the only thing your brain can do, is compare. All it can do is compare the two sides of the spectrum that it perceives, and you must fall somewhere within that to your brain. But that doesn't mean that's actually what is. What is what you are, not your thoughts about what you are. And that's so difficult because we're having a conversation that involves thoughts. And so to try and describe the reality, we must do so through thoughts. And that's where we start to misinterpret. That's when we start to think that the thing we're talking about is another thought.
I was going to say, but that's all just a thought, Ray. All of that's just a thought. So yeah, I'm not going to pay any attention to it. It's like, okay, you're paying attention to all the other thoughts. Might as well pay attention to the one that's taking you out of the fucking thoughts, right? You're paying attention to all the bullshit in your mind. Why is this the one thought you decide not to pay attention to? If that's where your focus settles upon, right? It's funny how people have that idea of, oh, that's careful. That's a concept. Careful. That's a story. Oh, that won't, don't do that. I can't do that because that's a concept. It's like, we equate what we do and don't do to like whether or not something's a concept. It's like they're kind of two different things going on. Like you can talk about a concept, you can have a conversation about something, and then it's pointing to something. But that's the necessity of the two-way street. Like this conversation is not just the words, it's the resonance. It's the willingness to look beyond the words and see what we're actually saying, what's actually being pointed to, the reality that's left beyond the concepts. But that's why we will never take credit for anyone who resonates with dualistic unity. It's like, that's fucking awesome. One, and it's entirely on you for resonating. There's plenty of people who don't resonate. There's plenty of people who hear this and they're like, have that same response. They're like, well, that's just an idea too. It's like, all right, you keep that up. You keep going with that one. But it's not. The recognition that the idea of the thing is not the thing itself is not an idea. Like, it isn't. It's just not. It's not even like, oh yeah, that's an idea too, but like, careful because it's actually pointing to something. It's like, that's not an idea. It's a paradox. It's a recognition of what's real versus what isn't. And the recognition that the idea of the thing is not the thing itself isn't a thought. It's something that is actually pointing to reality. But again, it's on you to be willing to see that and to be willing to look and let go of your assumptions of what any of it means and just actually look at it for what it is.
Yeah, because everybody else is saying that there's a certain way that I should be that's normal. And anything that's outside of that idea is a fucking disorder. And so immediately, as soon as I have this idea that I'm not acting like everybody else, which is an assumption, of course, and a culturally entrained assumption, because I watch the TV and I see how they're all acting. I got to act like them because all the other kids are watching TV and acting like the TV. And so all of a sudden we're all acting the fucking same. And if I'm not acting like them, there's got to be something wrong with me. And then I go and talk to an adult who's grown up in that fucking meat grinder. And they're like, yeah, you're not acting like the other kids. Here's some medication, which basically just numbs me enough to watch enough TV to fit in like everyone else. And it's just because we have this stupid idea that there is something that we're supposed to be, that there is an ideal human mentality that we are all just supposed to be sitting in and piling knowledge on top of. And if you're not understanding that knowledge, if you're not memorizing the same as everybody else, if you're not passing those tests, then obviously you're not intelligent, rather than maybe you're intelligent enough to see past all that shit and recognize that you got to get along with fucking people more than get a job. You know, you have to live with yourself at night. You have to go to bed thinking about all this stupid shit that they're making you think about to jump through hoops and shit. Or you can not do that because you got to spend your whole life if you're going to invest in that. And that's exhausting, right? But they don't teach you that because that's not going to help them continue the machine that they've all just gotten used to. And this is the thing, is that we can blame the system, but they got fucked too. Right? Like, everybody that you can blame right now for fucking everybody else over got fucked over generationally. And it's just because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Right? And this is the thing, the more we identify, the more that we are tempted by that power, by that need to satisfy this sense of lack. That's the result of the identity that we're clinging to. And it becomes this vicious fucking circle that we are all unintentionally cooperating in. And you can say, well, it's intentional, but half of us aren't even aware of how deep this shit is because we are so far away from that present moment where our intelligence is actually in operation at its peak efficiency.
Yeah, the whole idea of normal really fucks us up pretty good. Like, normalcy doesn't exist. Like, normalcy, when you think about it on a normal bell curve, which is just a type of a curve, it's an expression of like a measurement of what's happening. So normal is, if we took everything in society and the way that people act and kind of put it on a spectrum to some degree, and then we created a chart around it. Like, if we actually took people being authentic, it would be just a flat line, like with individuals along it being equal in the sense that it's flat. But we create because we want some certainty. We want to fit in. Like, this is the reality, the flat surface. And then we think that it's better to be closer to the middle. So it's like on a axis. Then we think it's better. So then we start to see it build like this. And then there's more and more and more there. And then these people are just shoving themselves into the middle of this thing to create what then looks like a normal bell curve, but it's just because everyone from the sides is like crowding in because they want to feel like they fit in. They want to feel better because they don't, unless it's in relativity to other people. But there's always the cost. Like, that's a double-edged sword. You're playing with fire if you're playing that game. And it's all based on the assumption that we're separate, like that we're something that exists within reality, separate from each other, separate from everyone else, separate from everything. And so therefore, it's like I'm no longer just what I am. I'm no longer value itself. I'm no longer just reality, an expression of billions of years of evolution. I'm now this thing separate from everything, and I need to find my value. I need to become more valuable. And so you look at other people who are getting looked at as valuable, and you start trying to emulate them or be like them. I want to be this person when I grow up. I want to be like that person when I grow up. And that's just buying into the normal curve. Like, I want to be like that person at the top of the curve. I want to get up there. I want to climb that mountain. I want to be that. And so we have a bunch of people. And then, so it's like, I don't know, the bell curve could be equated to a mountain too. And everyone's trying to climb the peak. That's just the middle. That's just the most standardized cookie cutter, like not really questioning much, just fitting in, that's like the experience of a lot of things, but like people pleasing. It's like buying into what everyone else is saying, just like, oh yeah, that's great. Oh yeah, that's great. Oh yeah, you're amazing. Oh yeah, you're awesome. Instead of like, hold on, have you ever wondered this? Not in a malicious, it doesn't even have to be in a malicious way. It's just in a questioning of it, so that a conversation ensues, so that growth ensues, so that change ensues, so that all of it continues on. But in this mentality of people pleasing, of buying into normalcy, of trying to be like other people, there's not very much questioning. It's just a striving. It's just put the blinders on and strive to be that, because they're happy, or at least they say they are. And so if I'm just like them, then I'll be happy. And it's all stemming from the perception of lack and the illusion that we lack right now, which doesn't exist.
Well, and it's the reason that we have some of our greatest atrocities in history, you know, like the Spanish Inquisition. Anybody who was different was something to fear, right? We had to make everybody as the same as possible. Everybody had to believe the same shit. Everybody had to fear the same shit. Everybody had to, you know, and that was the whole thing. I mean, this is the reason that we have wars, is because, you know, like, you would disagree with us, and, you know, therefore this is going to be an elongated argument. But I find it really funny that despite the obvious evidence that the outliers are the ones that change reality, almost nobody endeavors to be an outlier, right? But they're the ones that do. You know, Edison, Nikola Tesla, you know, things like that, like people, and Einstein, people who are willing to go, yeah, but have you ever thought of it this way? Rather than just like, please, can you just like me? Can I just fit in? Can I get a job? Can I answer the questions correctly so I pass the tests? They were challenging the tests, right? They were the ones going like, I'm sure there's a better way. I'm sure there's something more to this, you know, and they were usually very, you know, odd in one way or another. You know, it's the same with every character in the Bible who's worth reading about. They were all kind of fucked up. I think they were all odd people. You know, John the Baptist walked around wearing all kinds of animal skins on him. You know, there was one guy in the Bible who was basically half naked and dirty all the time. You know, well, why? Well, it's because they were giving up a lot of their stupid shit in their head. They're like, I don't need to think about that. And it was part of their step to freeing themselves. And that led to insight that eventually led other people to go, wow, that person's really insightful. And then they created a weird mythology about that person instead of just, you know, recognizing how they got there.
Yeah, the willingness to be you, to be what you are, to be that unique, to maintain that unique perspective. Like, it's a lot harder to do when you think your value is derived from how other people are perceiving you, because you can never go out on a limb with something, because everything's at risk, despite nothing being at risk, despite absolutely nothing being at risk by you taking a leap of faith, jumping out there. Like, you land on your feet in one way or another, and it plays out, and you find out. And that's the importance of letting go of the idea that you know what other people are thinking and what other people think about you, because you never do. And so in that, there's that state of uncertainty, which is also that state of freedom, which allows you to go out on a limb, Because before you go out on a limb, you don't know what they think of you. You don't actually know them. Your idea of them is not them. As you're going out on a limb, your idea of them is not them. Your idea of what they're thinking isn't what they're thinking. And after you go out on a limb, it's still uncertain. It's uncertain the whole fucking time. You never really know. And so you might as well do that. You might as well live for you, which doesn't necessarily mean the you that you think you are, but it's just about being in it, like being willing to explore and have the experience, as opposed to trying to live up to the made up ideals that you think everyone else has for you, which is really just your ideals for yourself. As if there is an ideal you, like you are that ideal you. You're always that ideal you. There is no ideal you to become or live up to. There's no expectation that someone else has of you that isn't just a reflection of an expectation they have of themselves, and you buying into it is just because you had that expectation of yourself too. And that's why we do it. But you can't become more. You can't become better. You can't really improve yourself. It's just, and when you start to realize that, the stress drops a little bit more, the relaxation rises, and then you can explore things, and then you can find things out, and then you can become the thing you've always wanted to become, which is just you without a need to be anything, without a need to be anything for anyone. And so these all play a part. The recognition that, the ideas of other people that you maintain are just you. They're just your ideas. They don't actually exist in reality. They only exist in your head. All the other people, every other person is just an idea in your head. And that's all they'll ever be. And your expectation of how they act and how they should respond to you is just your expectation of how you think you would respond in that situation. But it doesn't actually match with anything, because it's just you. It's just your own expectations of yourself.
See, I don't like that though. See, I want to have some degree of certainty about who we are to one another. Like, we're friends, right? Like, and if we are, then I don't have to think about this anymore, and I can just be whatever it is I want to do. I don't have to change, adapt, or grow. I don't have to pay attention to you changing or adapting or growing. We're friends, right? And unfortunately, that creates such conflict and stress. It's the reason that all of a sudden friends just drift apart, and it's because they're no longer changing together. One person is staying the same, and the other person's changing possibly, or the other person's hurt because the other person's changing. It's like, well, why are you changing? It's like, well, why aren't you? Right. And so it's so interesting how relationships will essentially get ruined by our need to make them become something other than what they are in the present moment. Like, we can't just go out on a date with somebody and enjoy that date without that date somehow implying that it may eventually lead to a relationship, whatever that relationship might mean to us. And that relationship will lead to happiness, right? And all of that other stuff. And so immediately there's all of this pressure. You're no longer being yourself because you're trying to fucking get somewhere, which means now you're catering everything you say to that end result that you have in mind, whether you mean to or not. And so the relationship itself immediately ceased to be as soon as you left it for the future that now is less likely to happen, because you've left the moment where you could have cultivated that future, helped it grow into something that isn't your idea of what a relationship should be, but it is actually the relationship in itself. This is something that we practice here on Dualistic Unity all the time. Andrew and I have no idea where this podcast is going. We have no idea where it's going to lead, what's going to happen, who's going to work with us in the end. And we get offers from people all the time, like, hey, I'd love to help out, things like that. And some of those people, we take them up on it, and some of those people we do not. And why don't we? Frankly, because at the moment, they're just not within our sphere. They're just not, necessarily in that mentality where they are trying to be for everybody else. It's still kind of about them to some degree, right? And there's no judgment there, but they're in the middle of a process that we have no desire to rush. And so we have no idea who's going to work with us in the long term, except by virtue of how much time they put into their own lives. And then we see them come around and have extra time for everything else, right? But there's no certainty in that at all. Like, we didn't see Amanda coming. whatsoever. And Amanda's put in more hours than we could possibly ask of anyone. And we've done the same, right? But it was never because we asked Amanda to do that. We never asked her, right? She just did it because it meant something to her. And so it's the same with all relationships. Like, we don't want some commitment to an idea. We don't want you to go like, yeah, I'm committed to dualistic unity. Commit yourself to your life. Dualistic unity is just something you can do with your free time once you are free. And the freedom comes from just letting go of a lot of this bullshit thought, right? The idea that you need to be something. And then after that, once you're experiencing that, you may want to participate in what we're doing, in which case we'll be glad to have you. But we don't want that commitment from you. We don't have any expectations. We have no idea where this is going. It's better that it just grows organically, like every other relationship.
Yeah, because that's the experience of freedom, is not having an idea of where it's going to go or what should be happening or how it should be playing out. With the example of happiness that you were talking about, especially in regards to relationships, we think that we can think that being in a relationship equals happiness, that being in a relationship and then doing all the things and doing all the, societal blueprint stuff gets us to a spot of happiness. But the whole time we're maintaining the idea of the right way to live, the right way to act. Like, freedom is just the experience of recognizing that there is no right way to live. There is no right way to act. You're an expression of that freedom when you let go of the right way to live or act, or the right thing to say in any moment. And you can feel it when someone, on a date, for example, they have this idea of, oh, a lot on the line here, because I hope this turns into something, and I hope this becomes something, and maybe we'll get married and have kids and live happily ever after. And so you can feel it in the words, trying to say the right thing as opposed to just saying, trying to act the right way instead of just acting. It's like, fucking A, how long are you going to put up this facade? How long are you going to try and be something to try and manipulate me, or manipulate someone, or manipulate whoever you're interacting with into liking you? You are being manipulative. We've said it before. People pleasers are manipulative. People think that's harsh. It's not. It is acting in a way with the desire for someone else to respond in a specific way. That is the act of manipulation. That is the experience of manipulation. There's no ifs, and, or buts. It's not like a gray area. That's it. Acting in a specific way with a desire for someone to respond in a specific way. Like, that's the experience of it. And so someone who's on the date thinking about where it's going or how it's going to turn out, or anytime you're interacting with someone hoping that they'll like you, it's transactional, comes with expectations, comes with a desire for them to like you. And so then you're acting in a way with an expectation of them. And you want to know the best way to get people to not like you? Expect shit from them. Expect them to respond to you in the specific way that you want them to respond to you, which is a very specific path, which is a very specific way of responding. It's not giving them any space to respond how they are. It's not giving them any space to be what they are. It's like you so badly want your value to grow that you're trying to get everyone to act exactly as you think they should. Trying to get everyone to act how you think they should. Not how they do, but how you want them to. It's like, that's manipulation. It's fucking dark. I get it comes from insecurity. I get it oftentimes comes from trauma. I'm not discounting any of that. We're calling spades spades. People pleasing is manipulation. Trying to get someone to act in a certain way in response to how you're treating them is the experience of manipulation.
That's really one of the the first big tests in terms of this journey, because in order for you to reconcile that, in order for you to really take that in, you have to take that hit to how you feel about yourself. Like, you really have to chip away at the idea of what you think about yourself is a measure of the truth, right? Because immediately we're like, well, if I admit I'm manipulative, I'm a bad person, right? Immediately there's that judgment. So we'll run from it just for that. And I remember that when it dawned on me, I'm like, oh, I am manipulative, and I just had to kind of take that one on the chin, because you do. That's the only way to stop doing it. is to go, yeah, I'm totally doing that. And that's it. Just, yep, I'm doing that. And then you can look at it. But until you're willing to look at it, until you're willing to go, yeah, I could be that kind of person. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person, right? You're not going to do anything about it because you're just going to avoid it, which means you're not going to see it and you're going to continue to do it. Right. That's all it is. And so, yeah, you really have to just take in the fact that you're manipulative for one simple reason. You want people to like you. You want to feel valuable. Like, all of your reasons are good. See, that's the problem with them. You are manipulative because you are trying to survive. You were trying to feel valuable. You were trying to feel whole. You were trying to feel liked. You were trying to feel all of the things that anybody on this planet alive would want to feel. You're just doing it in a way that's going to create the opposite. And your brain doesn't understand that, because your brain's just like, but control, and you don't have it. And so it really is just, I guess, important to recognize that your thoughts about what you should be doing are not what you should be doing. Just be what you are. Right? Just be what you are. And what you'll find is that there's an alignment with everything that happens. And then you can feel things happening. And then your best self can come to the surface, as it were, because you're not doubting it so much. Right? But it really is just a process of just questioning it. You know, when your thought comes up, just go, right, what am I trying to do with that? And don't judge yourself for doing that. Right? Like, the reason that we judge people immediately is so we can feel better about ourselves. Does that make you a bad person? No. But taking in that that's what's happening is going to make you less likely to judge other people. Right? But that's it. It's just taking it in. And we immediately go, oh, it's a bad thing. That's why when somebody is acting egotistically and we're like, well, that's kind of ego driven, they're like, what are you saying? It's like, nothing negative, but we're kind of indicating what's happening. Like, there's a certain mechanism that's at play here. Right? And while you might perceive that to be a negative thing, that is actually a result of the mechanism that you're invested in.
Exactly. Recognition is not judgment. It's just pointing out a behavior, and the experience that you're talking about there, recognizing that your idea of the right thing to say isn't the right thing to say. Your idea of what you should be doing isn't necessarily what you should be doing. Like, that's the experience of faith. Like, that's what faith is understanding that I don't need this sort of set thing and it all laid out and planned, and just like, all right, got it all planned now. Now, if I just do this exactly as I planned it, because I know with absolute certainty that if I do it, I'm going to be happy. Because why? Because this guy told me to do it, and he's happy, and he said this is how it played out for him. And that's it. That's what we do. Like, we create the structure. It's like, just follow the structure. And it's never freedom. It can't be freedom. Freedom has no structure. There is no structure to freedom. There is no right way to be free. There's never a correct way, ever. And the more you recognize that, the more you recognize there's no right way to act, there's no right thing to say, the freer you get, and the more willingness you have to step into that uncertainty and build that practice of having faith in yourself, because it is a practice. It's a moment to moment recognition and willingness to do so, but you can build on it. It's not this like, it is and it's not, but it is, this brand new thing every single time. But the brand new thing can be built upon. You can get more used to it. You can get more willing. It's not to say that you ever step into anything knowing how it's going to go, but you do it enough and you recognize clearly enough that anything you say or anything that comes out doesn't mean anything about you. It's not directly tied to your value. You're more willingness to step in. You're more willing to step into that. And then you keep doing it. And then that sort of becomes a habit, which isn't really a habit, because it's just continuing to walk out of the prison cell each and every moment, not knowing where it's going, not knowing what's going to come of it, not knowing the impact, which you never know. That's the thing, is you never know where it's going. You never know what the impact's going to be. You never know if it's going to be resonated with well or not. And even in the immediate, you can try and judge it and say, oh, that didn't go great. It's like, the action echoes in eternity. Always. So you can't even settle upon an idea of a good or a bad situation ever, because they don't exist in silo. There are no separate moments. There are no separate experiences. They're all tied together. So they're always impacting each other. And you settling upon an assumption about how it went is just because you're uncomfortable recognizing that you can't know. You can't know how it went. You can never know. You can never know the right thing to say. And then looking back, you can never really know how it went. So this anticipation and fear and then the judgment after the fact is all just assumption. They're not really what's happening. You're what's happening always. And it's not what you think. And there's no way for your value to waver. Your value doesn't go up or down. So with that, it's like there's going to be a more willingness to step into that and have the genuine experience of freedom. Doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, but it's an option. And the other options have potentially more consequences.
And there's nothing wrong with that either. Right? Like that's kind of the whole point. It's just recognizing that we all have these things within us. You know, it's so funny how religion would be like, you know, we're all sinners at the end of the day. And it's like, no, we have the entirety of the emotional spectrum within us. So we are all insecure. We are all frail. We are all judgmental. We're all manipulative. We are all doing those things. Well, why? Well, because it's part of the experience. It doesn't make us sinners. It's just that we prefer not to do those things. So don't do them. That's really it. It's not about telling other people not to do those things. It's about not doing it yourself, right? But they're not sins. They're not something you've done wrong. It's a result of a mentality that you can grow out of if you only have the courage to question it, to recognize that you do these things. Like, how often are the people who are the most like focused on the sin in others the biggest douchebags you know? Right? And that's very much the point, you know, is they don't want to see it in themselves. And so it comes to the surface because they don't want to see it, right? But everybody else can see it. And if you bring it up, they'll just defend themselves, right? Because they can't see it. So one of the biggest recognitions, and we're going to close this off in a minute, is that you're biased. Remember that. We're all fucking biased. We all just want to feel good. We want to feel better. We don't want to feel uncertain. And we are biased as shit. And if you recognize that, then you're always watching for it. Right? And that makes it less influential on you, right? But you have to recognize that without judgment. Recognize that you have all the capacity in the world to be, you know, the dictator and the hero, right? But if you can't see those things within yourself as possible, then you will be blindsided as they start to take over your life.
Absolutely. And with tying into this, the expectations, it's funny how we'll maintain expectations of someone else to act in a certain way and not realize that their expectations of you to not maintain expectations are equally as appropriate, equally as in potential as your expectations of them acting in a certain way. What about my expectations of you to not act in that way? Right? Is that not equal to your expectations? Like, what am I missing here? And then it starts to fall apart because it's like, oh, it really is just me. Oh, it really is just me expecting this. Because everyone has the potential to expect anything of anyone. And I can expect the exact opposite thing that you're doing as you're expecting me to act in a certain way. Right? And that's as appropriate as your expectations. So it's important to keep that in mind. It's all coming from you. But this has been a lot of fun.
This has been a lot of fun. Admittedly, we did not have a lot of callers today, and that's okay. We don't always have to have a lot of callers. It's nice to have the ones that we do have. It's great to hear from Amanda. Great to hear from Julia. Great to hear from everybody in the chat section. Thank you so much for participating in today's call-in show. We're going to take a brief break, and then we're going to continue on Patreon. You can still participate in our 7-day free trial if you have not joined us on Patreon. We are so confident that you will love the group discussions that you can really just try this for a week. We do 5 days a week of group discussions, and so get in there, give it a shot. Patreon.com/dualistic unity. We will be there for the next hour and a half.
Hi, everyone.